think another great example of this is in the story, and actually one of my more favorite stories in the Bible, actually, of the showdown between Elijah and the 450 prophets of Baal. And remember, so Jezebel was a follower of Baal because of where she came from, and I'm not a scholar in this by any stretch, so I don't want to get too far out over my skis. But in general, at the time, different deities had their own sort of geography, which was why in Lamentations and when the Israelites are in exile, it's how can we worship, because they were no longer in the geographic area where they could worship Yahweh. And I mean, in that story, of course, is fascinating because it's sort of like a contest. Who will answer first, right? And the 450 prophets of Baal are chanting and doing all of this, and nothing happens. And Elijah comes out and starts mocking them, even saying, if I remember the idiom correctly, like, you should scream a little bit louder. Maybe your God's on the toilet taking a dump, and that's why he's not answering. If you actually, the idiom that's there, it doesn't really say that
right.
in the text in the English, King James, but that's kind of the impression. And then of course Elijah comes in, calls down fire from heaven, and burns all 450 of the prophets. And then Jezebel, orders his death, and so growing up and reading that story, it was again to show how terrible Jezebel was, right? How evil she was. But again, pull back and what are the series of events? Like her religion, 450 of her priests were just essentially murdered. And so she went out on a reaction. And of course, she went after the guy who basically did it.
Well, and basic,
again,
basic, like the justice system, like going back to Hammurabi's code, like we used the death penalty so frequently, like an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Of course, now we have a more nuanced understanding of it, and I don't personally agree with the death penalty, but it's interesting to think that it's like, no, if you kill someone, like even one person could cause someone to call that life into, could put your life in jeopardy, that you killed someone. So now your life is in jeopardy because that's just one person. What gave you the right? Then we have the basic trolley problem of, would you pull the lever to kill one and save five? And overwhelmingly human beings say, yeah, we would pull the lever. It's just like basic utilitarian intuition, right? 400? Just because they worshipped the quote unquote wrong God? So not only is it prophets of her religion, take religion out of it. It's human beings, right? It's like, you just killed 400 fucking people. Yeah, I think your life might be in jeopardy here.
I mean, put it in modern terms. Let's just imagine in our world, in the United States today, if a non-Christian, so let's say Muslim or Hindu or whatever, killed 450, or incited a crowd to tear apart 450 Christian pastors, what would happen in this country? Like, just imagine what would happen. What would be, I mean, look what happened after 9/11, 20 plus years ago, and how it's changed the world. What would happen? And would it be justified? What would the justifications be in our world today if something like that happened? And
even
it's
put
wild
the shoe,
to think that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And even maybe giving the reaction, the benefit of the doubt separate from some of our leanings potentially. What if it was one Christian who called down holy fire and incited of violence to rip limb from limb 450 Muslims? Is that not actually, now that I'm saying that, it's like maybe we are witnessing that a little bit in Gaza right now. And how is the world reacting to that?
Yeah.
I think obviously that's complex and it's hard to draw direct comparisons here. So I don't want to get us too far off the rails, but I think your point stands, right? That the idea of vilifying someone for thinking someone who called down holy fire against 450 people is kind of wild.
Yeah, I mean, it's just and it's just to think about the story that I
Yeah.
mean that's being told there, and how do we interpret it today? How would we interpret it today? Because just to be clear, Elijah called down the fire to burn the offering, and then I believe the people rose up against these prophets of Baal. So
Okay.
it wasn't some supernatural event that destroyed well, I mean, the supernatural event incited the people to essentially stone or kill these prophets. So again,
Okay.
imagine that's and again, replace Christian, replace Christianity with any religion. You can do it in any combination,
Right.
but it's this idea that we accept that story, or I did for many years, as a good thing. Like, look at the power of God. Wasn't it a great thing? And how evil this Jezebel was to go after Elijah because of this. But again, it just shows how the meaning we make of things depends on where we sit, right?
Yeah.
And if we just step back and take a look at it, it changes everything. And I guess it's about empathy. I mean, I guess here we're talking about empathy again, right?
Yeah.
Like understanding what it feels like to be in that other position.
Right.
And again, it's that was I grew up thinking that was acceptable because these were heathens, right? These prophets of Baal were devils, demonic, and they deserved it. That's the subtext there. But we have to ask ourselves, is that who we want to be?
Right.
I think.
I mean, even the other Old Testament story that is referenced quite frequently in these kind of anti-apologetics narratives, and I'm going to forget exactly what the passage is, because if you're no Bible scholar, I certainly am not. But the calling of the Israelites to cleanse Canaan, I believe, of all of the people, and it says, like, kill men, women, children, the animals, and anyone who runs away and gets free, bring them back and then kill them. And then, of course, the natural response is, well, they had the option to leave. It's just if they didn't leave right then, that's when the cleansing begins. And it's like, that doesn't sound very Christ-like, and that doesn't sound like, would you leave your home? All of that to say, your point about look at the seat that you're sitting from when you view these stories, right? It's really time to interrogate what your frame of reference is built from and what seat you are sitting from when you watch it. And that is basic human empathy, is to say, oh, wow, I do have all of these preconceived notions. What does someone else's seat feel like?
Well, and yeah, and just to say, do I feel good about this when I really examine it? It's not to criticize. I hate to ever come across as critical of what people believe, because most of the time it's what they've been taught. And it doesn't necessarily come from a place of hatred or anything else. And I mean, for some people perhaps, but I think it's never been questioned, because questioning isn't safe. And so I guess I'm saying question the narrative. And think, if you choose to still believe, okay, that's your choice. That's the great thing about it. You can still choose to believe that, but don't take the time to critically think about it and say, wow, what is this story really saying, and how does it apply to me today? Is this what I would want to see? And if it is, it is. If it isn't, though, then you have to take action for yourself and say, okay, well, how does that change me?
Going back to what you said at the beginning, owning the meaning that you have made, right? Like, owning the choice in the meaning that you have made. It's like, that means thinking critically about making the meaning and making that choice and making sure that it lines up with any number of criterion you want to use. But then once you've made that choice, own it. Like, if you're saying you believe in X, Y, and Z, like, put your money where your mouth is. And if there is something in that that is inconsistent or dissonant, like, there are all sorts of ways that you can, still retain a religion and make it work for you and say, oh no, of course I decry like the actions of the Old Testament God, but I really follow Jesus. And if that is the way that you make it make sense for you, regardless of any sort of, logical or philosophical logician's arguments against it, that's fine. You're allowed to hold that belief. But you better own the inconsistencies that are there and be able to say, yeah, I get that there are inconsistencies, but look, it makes me live life the way I believe is the right way to live life, with kindness and love and, these universal qualities that we believe to be a good thing. You can't just say, I guess you can. I don't think you should just say, well, just don't think about it.
Right. Don't think too hard.
Yeah.
Don't look behind the curtain, sort of thing. And I mean, the problem is once you start pulling that thread, man, the whole sweater unravels real quick.
Ooh,
so
yeah.
it's not for the faint of heart. It takes courage and it takes bravery to examine that. Yeah. And not everyone's up for it. But I suspect that our listeners might be. And I hope that we're able to reach them and just putting it out there.
Yeah. Well, and again, not saying that you can't still identify as a Christian or the beautiful parts of the religion, right? That the thing that I always really loved about it when I did consider myself to be a Christian was that it's a religion of love. And it is the only religion whose savior is crucified, like, in a brutal, like, thief's death, right? Like, not an honorable death, not a pretty thing, but that the crucifixion is hard and ugly and damaging, and it's to spread love. Like, there are some good things in that to hold on to. Like, and so not to criticize that you can't still find a way to make it work for you, but you have to find a way to make it work if you want to live awake, right? For lack of a better term. I think that term gets thrown around a lot and kind of sounds pretentious, but yeah.
I think it's authentic. To me, it's, do you want to live authentically and own, you take ownership of what you choose to believe versus putting your fingers in your ears and going, la, 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 I can't hear you. Don't look to, it's about authenticity. And again, it's okay, to your point, to say, you know what, I get it. But, this is still what I believe. This is the message I believe, and I choose to continue to believe this. But I have a lot more, I don't know, I think it's just a lot more honest and authentic to say I've done that. And I mean, the very fact is most of us don't choose our religion.
Right.
It's chosen for us based on where we're born. And it's much more powerful when you choose for yourself that this is what I'm going to believe, because you have that right, because you are the creator of your beliefs.
Yeah.
I just, do it consciously, not unconsciously.
Yes.
Wake up. And again, I
Yeah.
guess the idea of woke, which is kind of a bad word
Right.
now, but it just means do it knowingly. Like choose. Don't just have it chosen for you.
Again, be the active participant in the meaning making, not the passive one. And
Exactly.
so I think, like, the at least long and the short of it for me is there a way to still be an ethical person and consider yourself Christian? Yes, of course. But
Absolutely.
you need to, in order to live it authentically And with attunement to what matters, awareness and consideration of these things is being an active participant in it. And when you start to be an active participant, that requires some critical thought and deconstruction and hard conversations.
Agreed.
To take us back to Jezebel, another thing that came, we always go off on our tangents, but to another thing that came up when you were talking about this idea of her never being described as queen. I never thought about this before until you just said it, at least in terms of the Jezebel story, is what would it mean to call a woman king? Sure, these are gendered terms, but I think even then there is a hierarchy inherent in a king versus a queen. Even if Jezebel was called queen, she's still not king. She's still one of her king's subjects, right? And I don't know. And this, I really like a word that you use quite frequently is sovereign. And I find that to be one that I really identify with, because it does remove this idea of gender identity from being able to be the ultimate authority over your path, your life, that you are your own sovereign and you are the one making these calls and choices. And even in the title of queen, is there something that is still, you are the neck that turns the head, not the head, because it is still secondary? I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, going back to the Garden of Eden. I mean, it's just like somehow primordial, in our DNA almost, this idea of, one having to be the head, and somebody has to be the head and somebody has to be the tail. And I mean, again, going back to the apocryphal story of Lilith, right? Because she wanted to be equal, not be the head, just be equal with Adam. She was cast out. Well, she chose to leave. Actually, she wasn't cast out. She up and went away. And I would also point out that she knew the secret name of God in that story, and Adam didn't. Just saying. So yeah, it's fascinating. And I mean, you see this in the New Testament as well. This idea of, a woman should keep quiet in church, the man is the head. Even though it's not 100% clear that that's what Paul believed.
Right.
That's fuzzy. But yeah, why can't both be the head? Again, why does it need to be one or the other? In particularly if it's a king queen, right? In this case,
Yeah.
Why do we need that? I think it's a deep question. Well, what is the insecurity in men, I guess, that causes that to be the case? That's something that we see, again, going back to the word ancient. This isn't something we're just looking at today. I mean, this is something that's
Right.
been there forever. And why? I'm curious. Maybe our listeners have ideas as to why.
I was just about to ask you why. What is it? And obviously, I think arguably the last few episodes and the continuing exploration of the conversation we're having in these episodes is the project of trying to understand that why, in part, so that we can uplift and speak truth to power in wanting to create this equality. But what's your gut instinct? If I were to mirror that question back to you, why? What is that insecurity in men? And of course, I'll let you off the hook a little bit and say, this is going to continue to evolve and change for you, of course, and there's no way you could possibly completely comprehensively answer this question in an hour-long podcast, much less, the next 5 minutes. But
no,
yeah.
I love that, because this is an exploration. And it's part of the reason why I'm so thrilled to be a part of what we're doing here. I know it's fear-based. because ultimately, whenever you try to push something else down, it's fear.